This video is sponsored by Tone Gym. A couple of months back, I made a video on the song Symptom of Life by Willow, which is not only in a very unusual 7/4 time signature, but is also built from these cluster chords. Cluster chords are voicings of chords where the notes are all, well, clustered together, creating quite a dissonant, dense sound. Cluster chords are the sort of thing you might expect from jazz, not a pop track, so naturally I was very intrigued about how this song came to be. So I reached out to Brad Oberhofer, one of the 4 songwriters on the track, and the man who provided the piano part, hoping that he could provide some insight into how this very distinctive song came to be. You know, the piano part is really central to this song, which makes me suspect it was what you started with, but is that correct?
We started with drums, actually.
Oh, really? Interesting.
But Asher came up with that crazy 7/4 situation.
I think it's one of 3 7/4 tracks on the album, which is quite extraordinary, really. Let's talk about these clustery chords. Is that something, those sort of cluster voicings, is that something you used before, you're used to using?
I definitely kind of sit down and play what I'm feeling a lot of the time. You know, the first thing I play is just probably whatever kind of like mood I'm in or how I'm feeling. So when I sat down at the piano and I was listening to the drums, it was really just my first instinct. You know, it was basically the first thing I played that night when I got there. And against the kind of 7/4 thing, it was really fun to kind of like fit in chords in interesting places.
Definitely.
And I messed with the voicings a lot. And I already knew I had this kind of and so that's kind of where it started, was kind of hearing that main melody on top. Which felt kind of cool to me.
Yeah, and you could have just left it as that, and I think the song would have still worked. But then, yeah, you took it that extra step.
Yeah, and I think I had it with the voice on top. At first, and I felt like it was too bright. And also, you know, every piano is different. So on Chris Griotti's piano, these notes sounded a lot more piercing, you know.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so then I kind of landed on, you know.
So the cluster voicing that you do, how many notes are in there? Is it 4 notes? Is it 5 notes in the right hand?
4 notes in each hand, and then I do sometimes play the E, but really lightly. It's just barely in there, though. It's really not touching that much. And also the emphasis is on the, you know, instead of playing everything else a little lightly, so it doesn't sound too dense.
Yeah,
that's the problem with cluster chords, is you're playing a lot of notes really close together, and so you do have to kind of play the clusters more gently,
so that melody still pokes through.
Exactly, and so it just doesn't feel too crowded.
Well, that the first one there, I can't tell exactly from the angle. Has it got F in it? That first one,
yeah.
F. Yeah. Okay, that's good to hear. Because when I first did my video on the song, it just come out, so there's no other transcriptions to kind of like use as a guide, and it's so hard to hear exactly what's going on. I got to the point where I took the recording, isolated the piano, converted it to MIDI, and then I also like put it in Melodyne just to make sure I was like hearing every note. And there was that F there, and I thought, yeah, there's an F. And then that transcription that musicnotes.com released recently that I showed you, they don't have the F, and I thought, am I wrong or are they wrong? So it's good to hear from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, it's really funny. I'm amazed that they aren't hearing that they're totally wrong. I think that Music Notes transcription is which is like, it's so dissonant.
It's a hard thing to hear, and yeah, I guess they, you know, I don't know what the process behind their transcriptions are, but I guess they just thought, oh, this will do, because they effectively took the same 4-note voicing and just moved it around, approximating it. So this transcription of Symptom of Life by musicnotes.com didn't accurately notate the cluster chords here, didn't get all the notes right. Now, maybe they would have stood a better chance of transcribing this correctly if they'd been practicing their ear training using today's sponsor, Tone Gym. Tone Gym offers a whole range of ear training games to improve your listening skills. For example, their game Route 6 plays you a short chord progression and you have to identify what those chords are by ear. Or you could play their game Chordless, which instead focuses on chord type, so you have to identify whether the chord is major or minor or diminished, etc. You can also practice other aspects of music, for example intervals. With their Departures game, you're played a melodic interval like a perfect fifth or a major sixth, and you have to identify what it is by ear. Use the link in the description to start improving your ear today with Tone Gym. The drums came first, you laid down the piano, then was it a case of writing the melody over the top, and was that Willow writing that or somebody else?
Yeah, I couldn't believe the melody that Willow was able to write over that. I was just like, how did you make this work? Because, to me it felt when Chris was like, oh, that's money, like that's what we're gonna use, that's like what we're gonna use, I was kind of just like, you have to be crazy, like I don't know how Willow's gonna write a vocal part. I was amazed when she came up with that.
I assume that was a latter, that was a later day, not the same night at midnight.
Yeah.
And then that same initial night that you wrote this section, did the chorus come into existence then as well? The chorus where it goes to 4/4 time, or was that added later?
So Chris and I, we kind of talked about what would feel like a chorus, and I did play some chords over it. But I think he ended up taking out the piano chords and just being like, this should just be like bass, just be simple,
Yeah.
And they really like stacked the vocal so it feels really full. And the arrangement that Chris and Willow came up with is just really smart. Having things like drop out for the chorus there, and the chorus just kind of hits harder.
I think it's a good choice because the verse is, you've got the very busy drums, and then your piano part, which is quite dense, and then the vocals, which are quite sort of acrobatic, and then the chorus is like a relief from that. It's as much as I love the piano part, the chorus is kind of my favorite moment because it's suddenly just all of that pressure that's built up is like released, and like, yes, this feels good. Am I right in thinking this is the only song that you worked on Willow's album?
Yeah, it is.
Cool. Well, and I think there's another 7/4 track on the album called Big Feelings, which also has amazing piano work. And I can't remember his name, is Zach.
Zach Tenoria.
That's it, yeah. And it's amazing that you've got these two very piano-focused 7/4 tracks on the same album, but then they're both wildly different at the same time as well.
I have such big feelings. Can't shut them down.
Zach is awesome. We've gone back and forth a lot, and he plays with her, like he played with her at her Tiny Desk concert and stuff, and we were going back and forth on what the chords actually were, and yeah, he's awesome.
Now, in my original video on this song, I did label these chords, but because I was working them out from ear, I didn't necessarily get them exactly right. But now that Brad has shown us the exact notes involved in these clusters, we can label these chords properly. The first chord has the notes F, G, A, and C clustered together over A and E in the left hand. That makes for an A minor 7 flat 13 chord. The A, C, E, and G gives us the A minor 7, and then the F is our flat 13 note, which means I did actually get this chord correct on my original video. The second chord has the notes C, E, F, and G clustered over the notes F and C. So this is an F major 9 chord, albeit missing the third, the A. But the note A is basically implied by the previous chord and is probably still resonating here anyway. Now, this chord I almost got right in my previous video, but for some reason I thought I heard the note B in there as well, which is why I also included this sharp 11. The third chord has the notes D, E, F, and A clustered together over G and D in the left hand. There's a couple of ways to label this chord, but I think the best option is G9 add 13. The F and A here are the 7th and 9th degree, which are part of that G9 chord, and then this E is the add 13. On my original video, I was sort of half there with this one. I called it G sus4 add 13. So I had the add 13, but for some reason I also heard the note C in there, the sus4. Perhaps it's because it was still hanging over, still resonating from the previous chord. And the final chord is the notes A, B, C and E clustered over D and A in the left hand. The best label for this one I would say is D minor 9 add 13. The C and E here are the 7th and 9th degree, which are accommodated in the D minor 9 chord, and the B here is the add 13. We haven't got a third in the chord, but the F from the previous chord basically implies that this will be a D minor, not a D major. And like we've discussed with some of these other chords, the F was probably still resonating from that previous chord into this chord. So with this one, I was once again very close, but for some reason I seem to hear a G in the chord as well, which is why I've written 11 here. And I also missed that there was a B, so I didn't include the add 13. So a massive thanks goes to Brad Oberhofer for taking the time to talk to me about this song. Do go check him out on YouTube and Instagram and everything down below. He's got some fantastic music on Spotify. You should definitely check him out.
I don't have like tons of pop songs that I've written, so it's funny that people are starting to ask me to make weird chords.
What I love about it is it's 7/4, but it's not like an obvious 7/4 rhythm. It's like that. It's like 12/8 plus 2. It's like 14/8 maybe.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
It feels natural. Like you don't have to count beats to be able to play it intuitively, which I think is like a silly way to approach odd meter, is to like force your brain to work really hard. Like odd meter should come out of like a natural feel, not something that's like forced. It was cool. It was the first weird approach I think they had on the album, and I feel like I got to like bring the strangeness to the situation, so it was cool.